After years of living with the situation of illegal border crossers, your government is now working on amending the Safe Third Countries Agreement. Why do that now?
We've continued to have a very strong and positive relationship with the United States, in which we talk about border issues all the time. Obviously, the border question has been somewhat politicized and charged domestically in the United States, so there's been challenges in getting them to move forward on their northern borders in ways that make sense. That's something that we've continued to have discussions on in a very frank way over the past few years. The issue around our immigration and refugee system needs to remain one of confidence. We are one of the few countries in the world where citizens are overwhelmingly in favor of immigration, understand that it's a plus to our cities, towns, and communities, that it leads to economic growth, that it leads to more opportunities for all of us. And one of the reasons that Canadians do have confidence in immigration as a positive force in our country is because they have confidence in our immigration system. And even with irregular border crossers coming into the country over the past few years at a higher number than usual, we can reassure Canadians that every single one of those people gets a full security screening and is entirely processed through our rigorous immigration and refugee system. They come, they claim asylum. We do an evaluation as to whether or not they are indeed refugees and asylum seekers fleeing for their lives, fleeing persecution, violence, and death. And if they are, as Canada must, we welcome them. If they are not refugees, they will be returned home. That is our system as it applies. We are dealing with larger than usual numbers and have had to make investments to account for that. But the integrity of our immigration system continues to hold.
You've faced increased demands from municipalities and provinces to offset some of the costs of accommodating refugees and settlers and so on. Is that something that you see the federal government taking more responsibility for financially? Absolutely.
We are continuing to work with all of our partners, particularly in Ontario and Quebec. I have to say that the Quebec government has been an extremely good partner in dealing with this. Obviously, the Roxham Road crossing in Quebec has been the main point of crossing, and therefore Quebec has had to step up significantly, but we are certainly working very closely with the Quebec government and indeed investing and sending them more resources, and we're looking at finalizing that shortly on making sure that they are being able to handle these extra pressures. On the Ontario side, unfortunately, the provincial government has not wanted to engage in any way with the federal government on this issue, despite our repeated attempts to come to a working arrangement. And we have instead work directly with municipalities. I can highlight that John Tory in Toronto and Bonnie Crombie and others have been excellent partners to the federal government in terms of making sure that there are supports not just for the new arrivals, but for all the services that people living in these cities need. The federal government recognizes that municipalities are engaging in extra costs because of this situation, and we are there to be partners with them. It's been very positive with municipalities in Ontario and with the province and municipalities in Quebec.
How can you have two MPs in your caucus who continue to damage your party?
One of the things that has always been a strength of the Liberal Party of Canada, and certainly has been a contrast from the way that Stephen Harper and the Conservatives managed their government, managed their caucus, managed their approach to democracy, is we recognize that a diversity of perspectives, of experiences, of opinions is extraordinarily important if we're going to fully reflect the extraordinary diversity of Canadians. That's why we loosened the rules around whipped votes, why we encourage committees to continue to do their work independently, and why we recognize that within a same party we can have absolutely differences of opinion. But on the big things, the matters of investing in the middle class, moving forward on reconciliation, protecting our environment and growing our economy at the same time, everyone in the Liberal Party believes in that, understands that that's a priority, and understands that having Andrew Scheer determine the direction for this country would pull us backwards in a whole bunch of different ways. And that's why we are pleased to have a diversity of voices within the Liberal Party.
Jane Philpott says there are details about a meeting you had with her January 6th or 7th prior to the cabinet shuffle. What is it that Canadians are not being told?
We heard testimony around that meeting, and I can be very frank with you. We had a discussion about her taking on the President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Digital Services role, and I also told her about the fact that I wish to move Jody Wilson-Raybould into the position of Indigenous Services. She asked me directly if this was in link to the SNC-Lavalin decision, and I told her, no, it was not. I then she then mentioned it might be a challenge for Jody Wilson-Raybould to take on the role of Indigenous Services, and I asked her for her help, which she gladly offered to give, in explaining to Jody Wilson-Raybould how exciting this job was and what a great thing it would be for her to have that role for reconciliation, for the government, and that it would be a very positive thing. It was a good and positive conversation. Normally, federal infrastructure money flows to the province, and then the province flows that money to the municipalities. And the federal municipal infrastructure transfer, the gas tax fund transfer, has always been sort of a separate and smaller thing. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, we're in a situation where the current provincial government in Ontario has not wanted to partner on investing in infrastructure across the province, particularly in our cities, with the federal government. They have moved forward somewhat on rural projects, but have indicated that they do not want to flow any money to the cities in Ontario from the federal government. And that is a real disappointment, because we have put forward billions of dollars in infrastructure for the people of Ontario, for things that we know are needed right across the province. Because this province and a couple of others have been unwilling to move forward in partnership with the federal government on infrastructure investments, we decided that doubling this municipal infrastructure transfer this